There you go. There you go. Woo! See? That's every time. Woo!
Good morning, Timothy, and good morning to everybody who is with us this morning, Sunday morning. Yes, it's not Monday, it's not Saturday, it's Sunday morning, November the 17th, and this is the 197th episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One, delivered to you in collaboration by Langley Esquire, the government affairs consultancy firm, and Japan Expert Insights. We are here with Timothy Langley, the CEO of the company, and me, Maya Matsuoka, as a host. And it's a pleasure to be, to see how many people we have with us this morning again. Timothy, I don't want to keep everybody waiting today, so I'll give you the screen. Yes, and then after you tell us what we're going to hear about this morning, I would like to give a shout out to our sponsors as well. But first and foremost, what are we going to hear about today?
Great. Thank you very much, Maya, and welcome everybody. Good morning. It is a very beautiful day in Tokyo, a little bit, maybe around 23 degrees, a little bit overcast. I am once again on the good ship Grimm's and reporting to you live on what's happening in Japanese politics. We focus on what's happened over the last week to keep you up to date. And boy, it's been an active week. The next couple of weeks are not so active because the Diet won't be in session. The Prime Minister is out of the country right now. He will be coming back Sunday night, and then the Diet will start 11 days from today, and there will be about a 30-day session there. I'd like to get into that a little bit more. The yen is now at $154 to the yen. It has weakened a little bit over the last week. On the other hand, though, the approval rating for the prime minister has gone up a couple of ticks. It's now at around 43%. It was at 32 or 33% during the election process. And boy, so much has happened over the last couple of weeks. I'd like to get into that a little bit in the briefing. Nippon Ishin-no-kai, the leader, Mr. Nobuyuki Baba, has decided that he would resign, and the governor of Osaka has said, I'll take that slot. So they'll have an election coming up. Baba won't be a contender, but it looks like the governor of Osaka has decided we really need to take charge here and go forward on that. Over the last briefing, we've had so much happening. The prime minister was elected. Donald Trump became president of the United States and has been announcing all sorts of appointments. Many of them directly impact Japan and U.S.-Japan relations. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But the most important thing right now in terms of Japanese politics is what's going on with the LDP, the balance of power, this new era that we're entering into, and of course, what the prime minister is doing in Peru and in Brazil. I'll get into those in a little bit more finer detail. And then, of course, your questions that really bring the heat and the light of this briefing together. We'll try and go for about 45 or an hour and 20 minutes, Maya.
Yes, we will try to be as concise as possible. Sometimes it isn't, but that's fine too, because we appreciate everything that Timothy wants to share with us, me and the audience, and also we appreciate you, the audience, being with us here and sharing your thoughts, comments, and also questions. And before we continue, Timothy, I would like to say a big thank you to our first sponsor, the wonderful Kanchu, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku. You can find them at kanachu.com. They offer bilingual services in Japanese and in English to individuals who want to buy and sell real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama. They also offer property management and investment property. So if you have any such projects or even just ideas in mind, reach out to James Howell at james@kanachu.com. And you can also connect with James on LinkedIn. We recommend their services, and also we recommend working with James because he will hear you out and give you some more ideas and tell you how to enhance your project and realize it as well. Timothy, back to you now.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to put this a little bit into perspective, since so much has happened over the last maybe 8 weeks, let me just encapsulate it for you a little bit so that the perspective comes to you. So it wasn't but 8 weeks ago that the LDP presidential election happened. That's when Mr. Ishiba was one of 9 candidates to become the president of the LDP, and thus, traditionally, the Prime Minister of Japan when the Diet came back into session. So he was elected. He had a runoff. He got the most votes, but it was very tight, not a complete sweep. He became Prime Minister the following week. That was on the, let me see, the 27th was the election of the presidential, and then they went immediately into a 4-day session where he was elected as Prime Minister, and then he left for an international trip. I think it was just a 4-day session. They elected him. They brought everybody into the Diet. The emperor opened the session, and then they closed up very quickly so that he could go to ASEAN on that Friday. And let me see. Then we had, although he promised in his campaigning as president of the LDP that he wouldn't call for an election quickly, he did. He called for an election on the soonest possible date, and that was on the 27th, which was 3 weeks ago, 10-day campaign. Then the LDP came back with a real beating, and the Constitutional Democratic Party came up as the #1 main opposition party. But the real news there was the Democratic Party for the People under leadership of Mr. Tamaki. And so over the last, 3 weeks or 2 weeks, especially this last week, the goings back and forth with how the LDP is going to cover the shortfall. We talked about that in our last briefing. Because of the election, the LDP and their Komeito partner no longer holds at least 50% of the Diet seats. So that means it doesn't control how policy is made. It doesn't control committee seats, the committee chairman seats. And so as a consequence of that, this whole week we've been trying to figure out and get comfortable with this new way of Japanese politics. So for the last 30 years, it's had a certain recipe. We had a little bit of a blip there when the LDP lost to the opposition. It lasted a very brief period of time, less than 2 years, and mostly damaged by the triple disaster that we suffered in 2011, excuse me. So this new feature, I mean, it's the first time in 30 years that an election for the prime minister took 2 rounds. It's a very rare occurrence. And not only that, to show you how much dissension and fracture there is within the Diet, LDP and Komeito consist of 221 votes together. In the first round, 221 votes were received by Mr. Ishiba to become prime minister, and it wasn't enough to beat all of the other contenders. All of the other contenders voted for their party president. The Constitutional Democratic Party voted en bloc for Mr. Noda, and everybody in the Democratic Party for the People voted for Mr. Tamaki, and so and so. When they went through round 2, the people who were voting for Ishin or for the Democratic Party for the People, they continued to vote for their leader, even though they weren't a candidate. There were only 2 candidates in the second round, but still they stuck to their guns. So that means that the election of the prime minister was decided basically a race between the LDP 221, which stayed 221, and the Constitutional Democratic Party, and the Communist Party voted with them. It wasn't enough to eclipse it, and so Mr. Ishii became prime minister. This has all happened just over a very short period of time. We've had 4 days of Diet deliberations. There has been some decisions made. There were some appointments made for unfilled seats or vacated seats in the cabinet. Interestingly enough, I mean, there's just been so much going on. Um, when on the day that they elected the prime minister, there was a news report from one of these tabloid magazines. It's not Bunshun, but a Bunshun-like magazine that exposed Mr. Tamaki in a sexual tryst with some fashion model or some influencer. She's actually got a government job as an ambassador for the prefecture, and a very pretty girl. And they were exposed in this expose in this magazine on the day that the diet was coming together. I mean, what a huge punch in the face that must have been. As a consequence of that, Mr. Tamaki's star has fallen quite a bit. He was on a real roll, as you might recall, being in the newspapers constantly and on press and looking very sharp, looking dapper, a nice suit, always a blue suit, his eyes always looking towards the horizon. He had a very nice appeal, I think. And the fact that he was not able to come to terms with the LDP needs 20 seats in order for it to have a majority. Their idea was, let's get in bed, let's make something really nice for Mr. Tamaki and the Democratic Party for the People, and bring them into this coalition. So the coalition would be the LDP, Komeito, and the Democratic Party for the People. That sounds pretty good. From the Prime Minister's perspective, he's got 3 vacant cabinet posts. He could dangle one. He could make something attractive. And they went through negotiations there. And at the same time, Mr. Tamaki was being approached by the Constitutional Democratic Party. Why don't we, as the opposition, why don't we form together and kick those bums out? Let's get together. Let's put all the opposition parties. Mathematically, that would have worked. Mr. Tamaki took the middle road. He didn't bite the apple that was offered to him by the LDP. And in fact, he decided instead, with the LDP, he had a meeting with Mr. Ishiba. He said, look, I don't want to get into a coalition government with you, but on issues that are important to me and my party and that have been discussed in my manifesto that got me elected and increased the participation of my party in the lower house, I have an obligation to pursue those. But there are other issues that you propose, that you aspire to, that I don't aspire to, I don't agree to, and so I don't want to get into a coalition government with you. I'd rather go at piecemeal. So that's the worst situation for Mr. Ishiba. He can't really depend when he needs to on the Constitution, on the Democratic Party for the People, the 28 seats that they have, far more than what he needs. And as a consequence, he's kind of in a bad position because he can't control things. So as a result of that, we talked about this last week, of the 17 committee chairmanships that also go along with who's prime minister, how many votes they got, what is the power distribution within the lower house, the committee chairs are also distributed in a kind of mathematical formula that represents that. And what the LDP had to do is they had to concede the most powerful committee chair, which is the budget committee. When you watch questioning of diet members and the prime minister raises his hand to respond to somebody, it's a very elaborate atmosphere. That's the budget committee. It's the largest committee meeting room in the parliament. And it turns out that the prime minister and Mr. Tamaki could not make that joining of forces come together. So the Constitutional Democratic Party was able to secure the chairmanship of that committee. That's the most powerful committee, and it allows the chairman to call for questioning any member of the Diet, including the prime minister. In 30 years, the LDP has always held that position. So this is a key feature of this new era that we're going into. So I can't stress how significant, I can't stress enough how significant this appointment is and what kind of problem this is going to cause the prime minister. So you've got the Constitutional Democratic Party in the budget committee and the Democratic Party for the People not quite in bed with the LDP, except when they want to, when it serves their purposes, but they're basically still in the opposition. So you've got the Constitutional Democratic Party holding the Budget Committee chairmanship. It's not all powerful, but it's pretty good. You can define the agenda. You can define the length of time. You can define the questioning that will be allowed. It's a very powerful position. And in addition to that, you've got the Democratic Party for the People, who are not in the coalition with the LDP. This is going to make things completely different than LDP politics has been for the last 30 years, where basically, even with the budget, we're talking about a supplemental budget when the prime minister comes back in a diet session that will end in December. But for the big diet budget, the budget that needs to be passed by the parliament before April 1st, this requires a lot of back and forth negotiating. And in the past, this has all been done internally to the LDP and then hoisted onto the rest of the diet, and they would debate it, they would talk about it, but ultimately, since the LDP had the majority, they would vote for it, it would pass through. That's not what we're going to anticipate going forward. So I've got to warn you that it's going to be very tumultuous, and there's going to be a lot of things coming up. I think with the Constitutional Democratic Party, Mr. Azami Jun, as the chairmanship of that budget committee, he's going to want to know a little bit more about this slush fund and who received the money, and are they going to pay it back, and what kind of reparations or punishments they will suffer, even if they didn't win their seat. There's still investigations going on there. This is important, and this is a danger sign for the LDP, because the upper house election will be the summer in a couple of months, 7 months, 8 months from now. There'll be a election for the upper house, and the upper house wants to cleanse itself from this scandal that beat the LDP so badly. They want to distance themselves from that before that election. So they're going forward doing that. But whatever they do, whatever investigations or questioning that they might initiate, it's going to have an impact on the lower house too. And, among the split, there are more violators in the lower house than there are in the upper house. So this could really cause a lot of turmoil. And what the Diet is supposed to be doing, what the committee's work is supposed to be doing, is chewing on bills and forming laws and proposing them for a vote to become, the laws that the bureaucrats will implement throughout the entire nation. So that whole process is just kind of on top of its head. So people like myself and Dan Harada and Tobias Harris and people who are watching this sort of thing are really, it's a new way of looking at things. Things that are coming out every day are closely studied by us because they present implications of how things are going to happen. We have to guess differently than we have been in the past. So I appreciate you, the audience, staying tuned. There's a lot to be going on, and we're greatly looking forward to it. Let me see what else I've got. Mr. Ishiba's approval rating, not strangely, but curiously improved from maybe 33% 2 or 3 weeks ago to 48%. And I think that that's largely due to the Diet being opened, the appointment of vacancies for the cabinet position, and this very public fight that he's having with the Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki. I think people are realizing Mr. Tamaki maybe bit more of the apple than he could chew. And also, I can't help thinking, and we can talk about this in the Q&A, it's so curious that on the day of the election for prime minister, this story broke about him having a sexual escapades. He's a married Diet member. He's got a family and kids and stuff like that. And as the leader of the Democratic Party for the People, it implicates him in, it's just a scandal that you don't want, but the timing couldn't have been worse for him. So it might have been a little bit of hardball. If you're not going to join the coalition with us and help us secure the needed 22 votes in order for us to eclipse the majority, we can go elsewhere, but it's not going to be nice for you either. So please consider your options and make sure you make the right decision. I'm imagining there might have been a discussion similar to that, because it's just so curious that would have happened. With regard to Mr. Ishiba, there are many people within the LDP and outside of the LDP who would vote with the LDP for a little bit of benefit in consideration. And if the LDP can generate another 22, not from Mr. Tamaki, I think what they would like to do is, say, forget it. That conversation, we don't, there's nothing to be had in that conversation with you anymore. We've moved on. So they will secure the 22 votes elsewhere in the Diet, even though they might not be LDP members, or they might be unaffiliated. There are plenty of those. In fact, there's almost as many unaffiliated members with a party or with a faction than there are those who are affiliated. So that's a big swing vote. Those members of the parliament vote with their conscience. They vote with the manifesto that they've produced to their voters, and some of them can hold a real considerable sway. So I think that's the direction of the prime minister. We'll find out more as this really unrolls. But like I said, the prime minister he was in Peru for the APEC summit. The APEC summit was going on all last week. He signed up for the last 2 days of that. He left on Thursday. He was there Friday and yesterday. He met with Biden. He met with President Xi. He met with President Yoon of South Korea. Apparently, they had some really good, fruitful discussions, particularly with South Korea. There was a lot of reportage on that. The things that he talked about are the things that you would have imagined. With Xi, he said, please reduce the ban that you have on importation of Japanese food stocks. With Korea, there's a lot going on with North Korea. There was this back and forth between South Korea and the military, the self-defense forces here. So this growing relationship, I think Mr. Yoon is not going to be able to succeed himself in the next election. And we don't know how long Mr. Ishiba is going to be prime minister, but they had their talks about what to do with North Korea, with the missile firings and the abducted Japanese citizens that are there. That's always on the agenda. So we expect to hear more. The G20 is from tomorrow, I think tomorrow and today, tomorrow and Thursday. It's a very brief one. Once again, he will be on international travel, and frequently with leaders of any country, as hot as it might be politically at home, one of the escape clauses is just to go international. You get a lot of public support by being out of the country, by being seen with foreign leaders. And so that might explain why his popularity has gone up rather suddenly. But it's something very close to watch, because his popularity, even coming in as prime minister, was lower than it's been for any prime minister for 25, 30 years. So it was pretty dismal for him. Moving forward, the Diet is closed right now. The prime minister is out of the country. They announced, I think, Friday that the Diet will now start in 11 days. It will have a 30-day session from November 28th to December 21st. That's cutting it pretty close. It's the end of the year. But they need to have a supplemental budget passed. They've all talked about that. That was one of the insistences of Mr. Tamaki is, raise this threshold of tax-free salaries, annual tax-free salaries for many of the people who are living at the lower end of the economic scale. Raise it. If you earn $1.3 million per annum, it's tax-free. But beyond that, then the tax kicks in. He wants to raise that minimum from 103, $1.3 million.
It's 1.03 million. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. the decimal there, 1.03. He wants to move that, thank you, Maya. He wants to move that number from 1.03 to 1.78. And so there's a huge fight going on there, not just between the administration, the LDP, Komeito, in trying to form this tax advantage for those who are in the lower economic strata, but also for the governors of the many prefectures of Japan. They are also very angry about this because it reduces the amount of revenue that they are able to extract from the central government to run their business. So there's a huge fight going on there. I think with Mr. Tamaki, he probably held his guns and said, I need these things to happen, and then I will go into a coalition with you. And it was basically deemed as impossible. We can't do that. I mean, the easier thing is to reduce the consumption tax from 10% to maybe 7%, but we can't even do that. So your demands are just, they would cost the country just too much money. So we can't do that. Can we talk about other items that might satisfy you in order for you to come into a coalition government? They weren't able to make that deal, so they fell short of it. So the diet will start in 11 days, run for 30 days. There are 13 seats. I've corrected myself. 13 seats between the LDP and Komeito to make a majority of the policy decisions or the votes that are on the floor of the lower house. I think the LDP, like I said, is not in a position to join hands with the Constitutional Democratic Party regularly or in some sort of a guaranteed or reliable fashion. So they've got to go someplace else to do that. And that will become a little bit more apparent once the diet gets into session. So between now and when the diet starts in 11 days, there's not going to be a lot of diet talk, but there'll be a lot of party talk, a lot of machinations going on, a lot of discussion about what this supplemental budget must include. So we know that there's going to be a subsidy for gasoline and for electricity. There's probably going to be maybe Niman or Samman distributed to people who are in a certain economic category. If you have a child, then you might get Niman as well. So those discussions have been going on. This supplemental budget, as being proposed right now, is bigger than the last supplemental budget. So who knows how it's going to shake out? When they do a supplemental budget, the great thing about a supplemental budget is that it kicks in quickly. It's initiated into the economy rather quickly. It is not like the annual budget that is passed on April 1st. That's a year-long budget. You pass that budget, then the bureaucrats come together to form the regulations and the rules to underpin that budget, and then that goes into effect the next fiscal year. So even on April 1st, when they pass the budget it doesn't come into existence until the next fiscal year, because the bureaucrats have to prepare all the documentation and the rules and the regulations doing that. So let me see, where are we with the committee postings? The LDP, there are 17 committee postings in the lower house. The LDP got 8 committee chairs. The Constitutional and Democratic Party got 6, and it could have gotten maybe 7, but it gambled and won a concession to get the budget committee. So I don't know what kind of negotiations were there, how valuable that committee is. They must have given up something very valuable to the LDP and Komeito to retain that seat, but they're going to pay a price for it for sure. And we'll see more of that. Ishin got 1 committee chair. The Democratic Party for the People got 1 chair, and Komeito got 1 chair. But this is just at the committee level. Throughout this last week, the LDP also announced the assignments for vice ministers throughout the rest of the administration. So that's pretty important to who is going to be the vice minister supporting the ministers. That was circulated just on Thursday. For Mr. Tamaki, I mentioned, yes, it's 1.03 million to 1.78 million. This really impacts mostly students and working mothers, but I think that was a large portion of the voters that helped propel the Democratic Party for the People into the position where they went from 7 seats to currently 28 seats. And let me see. If the government were to agree to his demands, and they're not bad demands, but I think they just can't agree to it, but there'll be some back and forth going on there. The revenue shortfall would be between 7 trillion and 8 trillion yen per year. And that's the same thing as a consumption tax cut of 3 to 4 points. So a lot of decisions need to be made for a supplemental budget. Currently, maybe 30,000 yen per household for households under a certain income level, 20,000 per child. That would probably cost around 13 trillion yen annually. But it's a supplemental budget, so the hit is quick. It's distributed quick. It's supposed to have a very soon impact on the economy, and the subsidies for gas and electricity extending until March. I think people are already anticipating that. Even though the economy took a positive blip over this last 3 quarters, it was about a 0.9% increase of the last 3 months. They just did an analysis compared to the 3 months before that. It is improving a little bit, but not a lot to shake your flag at. But everybody's watching that, and the Bank of Japan is watching it. Everybody's watching the yen and the stock market too, and what's going to happen with the new administration of Donald Trump. I don't know if you caught this other news, but an American tourist, a 65-year-old male, a white guy, visiting with his family, etched his initials into one of the torii posts at Meiji Jingu, Meiji Shrine in where is that, in Shibuya-ku? This happens every once in a while. It's shocking when it does happen. But this guy, I don't know if he's unstable. I think he's probably not, but he just thought it was a good idea. Nobody was watching. He wanted to put his initials there. But this is a big deal. I'm very thankful that it wasn't Yasukuni, but it is an American who did that, somebody of mature age, and it does cause a big brouhaha here. He was arrested on Wednesday. I think it happened on Tuesday. They arrested him on Wednesday. They're here for a short visit, and like the almost 3 million tourists that are hitting Japan monthly, were enjoying the sights and going to Shibuya. So that's not a very nice thing to report about, but it does happen from time to time. We talked a little bit last week. I think Joshua brought up the question about the cyber defense bill and what is the prospects of it being pushed through the Diet before the end of the year. And there has been more news coming out about that. We can get into it in the Q&A if you would like to, if Joshua's in the audience again. But it looks like the Prime Minister is pretty much hemmed in with fixing the LDP and the financing scandal and campaign contributions, that sort of thing. It looks like this year it's not going to happen. And that is what Mr. Kishida has been pushing on very hard. Mr. Ishiba inherited that. And also, all of the momentum is going to push that cybersecurity bill through the parliament, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Everybody acknowledges that Japan is far behind in cybersecurity and also in digital education, digital technology. So having a bill in Congress to enhance that would have been a very positive feature, also encouraging the allies of Japan as well. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. Finally, U.S. Steel became an issue last week, too. We looked into a little bit more. The president went on Bunshun. Bunshun is that magazine that comes out once a week, to talk about what his position was with regard to the passage or the restrictions of the U.S. government to have this purchase of Nippon Steel to U.S. Steel. He threatened that the company might consider suing the U.S. government for their interference. Right now, the transaction is geared at about $14.9 billion. It's a huge transaction. The Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. is studying this, and I think probably Mr. Biden is going to keep it in that committee. It's not going to come out of committee. It's not going to sail through. And Donald Trump has already said that it's violative of his America First policy, and he would probably not look kindly on the Japanese purchasing a critical asset in Japan. So Nippon Steel has sent their vice president Takahiro Mori to Pittsburgh to talk with the union to see what kind of other attributes or other negotiations might be had. They really want to close the deal before the end of the year, and today is what, the 17th? It's really going to be a tight deal. So something to watch, and I appreciate your questions on that. And with that, I'd like to wrap up this portion of Japan Politics One-on-One and turn it back over to Maya. And then let's get into the Q&A where most of the heat and light is generated. Thank you, Maya.
Apologies for this once again. Okay. Yeah, my cat, she was very vocal just until a couple of minutes ago. So, all right. Anyway, so thank you very much, Timothy. This was a very nice list of topics that you shared with us today. Before we continue with the questions and answers, I want to say once again thank you to our sponsors. This time to Houze Inc. So this is a company based in Yokohama, and they do custom home design, construction, and renovations, plus commercial building construction. If you have any projects in mind in these fields, please reach out to Hana Uroshizawa Howell on LinkedIn, and you can also find their website online, Houze Inc. This is something that they have been doing for over 40 years now, and the company has a long history of working in all these fields, so you can get your needs answered, and their reply, of course, their response to your needs will be customized. Well, Hana Uroshizawa Howell on LinkedIn, reach out to her. You'll also find details on how to connect with her in the description of the video on YouTube. So, Timothy, thank you very much for this. We have already received quite a few questions. I would like to start with the ones that came before. Actually, we launched the live stream today, and the first three of them come from Byron Johnston. So,
what a surprise!
What a surprise, yes. And thank you very much, Byron, for all the questions you share with us and for being with us. Just give me a second to get to the questions right now. All right, so here we go, Timothy.
Okay.
Could you comment on the differences between the supplementary budget of 2024 December as compared with the full annual budget of 2025 April?
Okay. I think
you touched upon this. Yes, you touched upon this. Maybe briefly once again. Just summarize.
The budget, it almost always occurs when you have a new prime minister, a change in the government, that sort of thing. It is designed to make people fall in love with you and to be rewarded for selecting you as the new leader or the new administration for the government. It is something that you can do. It's not pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It is something that can be done relatively quickly. And for example, in this session, they've given themselves 30 days to pass that budget. So that supplementary budget will be passed probably on the last day of the session. There'll be a lot of fighting, a lot of haggling, a lot of horse trading, and they'll finally come to terms, and then they'll announce it just 2 days after Christmas. And that money is immediately injected into the economy. So, for example, if they decide that they're going to increase the subsidies for gasoline or for electricity, it goes into, well, they say in the supplemental budget when it's going to kick in, but it kicks in relatively quickly. If they say every household below a certain income level is going to get money for each person or for the head of household or however they describe it, that check is cut and goes out within certainly within 60 days, but it goes pretty quickly. With regard to the annual budget that needs to be passed and is constitutionally mandated, it needs to be passed by April 1st, actually by the last day of March, and then it goes into effect on April 1st. That's for the entire economy. That's the entire budget, and it takes more than a year to form that. That's what bureaucrats are working on throughout the entire year. They finally pass it. The Diet chews it up from January when the Diet starts until April 1st. That's almost all they're talking about. They are passing bills. Their legislation is going on, but the main purpose of that Diet session is to pass the budget on April 1st. And that's a much bigger, that's a multitude of times bigger than what you might consider in a supplemental budget. I hope that responds.
Well, thank you for the answer. Moving on to the second question. Is it possible that the Democratic Party for the People's demand on setting the minimum taxable income at 1.78 million yen could be accomplished in the supplementary budget December 2024?
Okay, Byron, you're really well advised. Appreciate that. I think that's a bigger deal. That would require a real act of parliament, not a supplemental budget. I think that would be too big. It would be too big of a hit. I think for the supplemental budget, there are concessions that will be made, but I don't think it would raise that level. The argument for raising that level is the level was set about 30 years ago. And during that 30-year period, salaries have increased about 1.7 times. So when it was first set, when that level was set at 1.03 million per annum, salaries were much, much lower. And so Mr. Tamaki's argument is not a bad one. Since salaries have increased, you should increase that threshold too. What happens as a consequence of the government holding to this policy is that apparently people who could work more, and everybody that lives in Japan knows this, there aren't enough workers to go around in construction sites, in hotels, restaurants. If people could work more and not be burdened by the tax hit, then this policy would be effective. But right now, people are thinking, if I work more hours, then I'm going to be over the threshold, and now I have to pay 5% for anything less than between the bottom layer and 3 million yen per year. And then after 3 million, it goes to 10%. But I don't know if that's really accurate. I mean, if people can work more and get paid more, the 5% increase in taxes above that amount, yeah, I don't think that's going to be a decision factor. If people want more money, they're going to work harder and work more hours. But anyway, for Mr. Tamaki, this was in his manifesto. This was one of the promises that he made to his voters. It resounded with them, and look at what happened. I mean, he got a lot of votes, so he needs to pony up.
Right. And also, I need to probably add here that even within Kasumi Gaseki, there have been voices of abolishing this system entirely, so that no matter how much you earn, whether you earn below 1.03 million yen per year or over that, that just you pay your tax, and the tax may be lower and so on. But yeah, there have been such voices. This hasn't been actually a very popular policy so far, so it hasn't passed, of course. And I believe that with Mr. Tamaki, he's actually trying to find a middle way with his new proposal between what, some people, some voices, are actually saying, of abolishing the system entirely, because times have changed, right? And more people work, but at the same time, some people still think that, well, working more so that they can pay tax is not worth their time. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, there's another counter argument to that, though, too. Yeah. Mr. Tamaki is thinking to himself, we did so well. I increased the number of members in my party by 250% in this election.
Mhm.
And in 7 months, there's an election for the upper house. Maybe I can replicate that. So I need to be on top of things, and I need to be looking really good in this thing from the Flash magazine. Let's hurry up and push that in the background because we've got an election coming. And I think that's the same argument for the Constitutional Democratic Party and for the LDP and for Komeito.
Mhm.
Everybody is now looking towards that upper house election.
Right. Yes. But at the same time, if he doesn't, I just, a thought about what you said. Of course, he's thinking, and probably the CDP and so on, they're thinking of increasing their seats in the lower house, so that that's the house that has more power, basically, when it comes to policies and legislation. But at the same time, if he doesn't walk the line set by the LDP and become their ally, I think that there is far more danger for
Yeah.
him, right? When it comes to, well, reports like the one which was pushed out. I'm not implying that, the LDP actually, what's that, commissioned that report. No. But you never know in politics what happens behind the scenes, right?
What
And
did Donald Trump say with in his meeting, his fireside chat with Joe Biden? He said, "This is not a very pleasant business, but today's a very pleasant day." Politics is filthy. Politics is filthy.
politics is not clean, no. Okay, I continue with the next question from Byron. There are reports that prefectural governors loyal to the LDP have raised concerns about less tax revenue impacting their take of national budgetary resources.
Right.
Is that yet another obstruction by the LDP to the Democratic Party for the People's goal? And is it reflective of the belief that the LDP only lacks 12 members of parliament and they can be secured or procured from the unaffiliated opposition members?
Doesn't even require a response. You said it all right there, Byron. Thank you very much. And it was a great segue from what you had just earlier said. You don't want to cast dispersions to the LDP and say, that they are so Machiavellian and they concocted this idea and they persuaded Flash to produce this kind of scandalous story. But, it's politics.
It is politics. And also, if actually they decrease the tax, it also means that the budget, that the central government will have less
Huge.
of course, less revenues to implement their policies. So there is a lot going on here, and it's not just a one-side issue or black or white issue. There are a lot of players. Yeah.
Like Byron's other question, what's the difference between the supplemental and then the national budget?
Mm-hmm.
So this thing with lowering is, I think it's too big. It needs to go into the national budget. They might have some conversations about it, but it is too huge. And in fact, you might remember that Japan decided to go from 1% of GDP to 2% of GDP and devote that to military spending for 5 years. And we are now entering year 3. And already Mr. Kishida said it himself. I don't know where we're going to come up with the money. I don't know if we have the money to live up to that commitment. And not only that, but the yen has gotten weaker, and that 2% of GDP is now a lot more expensive. And these products that we're purchasing, these defense products, are calibrated in dollars, not in yen. So they're getting a double punch there. So the International Monetary Fund has already wagged their finger at the Bank of Japan, and the Ministry of Finance. Don't be playing around with the exchange rate, and be very careful about issuing more bonds to pay for things. You guys, you're on the watch list. You're going to be in trouble if you do that. It's kind of not nice to have other organizations tell you what to do, but it is an assessment. It is a piece of advice. But I think Japan is really under the gun to not spend so much money and to somehow generate more revenue. So that's the fight that's going on right now.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And also, I was wondering, we have a question from Kai. Thank you very much for the question, Kai. I'll read it out to you and I'll move on to others as well. So, Kai's question is about APEC, and then that's the APEC summit. Do you have any thoughts about why Ishiba-san was not in the APEC family photo?
I I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I actually am not aware that he wasn't, and thank you very much for bringing it up. So, all right. Well, I'm sorry for this, Kai. Maybe next time you can find out and give you the answer to this question.
I, I
So,
do I do know that the meeting had been going on for a week. He only came in the tail end. On Thursday, he left Tokyo. Friday and Saturday, I think they probably had their photo up on Saturday. Um, he fell asleep in the diet. That was reported in the press. You can't really be too critical about that. He was under a lot of stress throughout the entire election process, and then becoming prime minister. I can't really fault him for falling asleep and catching a couple of winks during the voting session, but yeah, you just never know. I think we probably have to wait a week, and I can report on it when we get together on Sunday next week, Maya. Thanks, Kai.
right. Yes, thank you. So, going on with Deborah. So, Deborah, good morning again. Thank you for being with us this morning as well. So, she says, I wonder how this new year is going to change life in Japan. So, if you can share your thoughts, Timothy. No,
Yeah.
right. It's
No,
really, we yeah, we can only guess. And
that sounds like a question I might get from Cam. Here's a big hole in the ground. Put your foot in there, right? Who knows? But it is going to be full of change and probably some turmoil. Everybody, even in APEC, the one person that they're all talking about is not part of APEC. He's not even president of the United States yet, but everybody is wondering what he's going to be doing. And you can tell from the picks that he's making for his cabinet, there's going to be change. There's going to be vast change going on in the administrative state in the United States. And that sort of thing always takes it takes a long time to shake out. For example, if you want to clean out the State Department, there are people that are working in the State Department, career diplomats. They're assigned to different locations. They're on contract. They're on contract. Their housing contract. Somebody's living in their house in Washington, D.C. while they're overseas. You just can't move those people out that have been fighting against your interests and put somebody else in new in a short time period. And that's just for example, the State Department. The other administrative agencies similarly suffer from that. But you've got Vivek and you've got Elon Musk for this government program to revise. Who knows what's going to happen, Deborah? But it's going to be tumultuous. I can be assured of that.
yeah, yes, I think there is little doubt about that. And well, Timothy, going back now to the LDP. So we know that they have accepted some of those people that were purged, the members that were purged because of the implications in the slush-fund-scandal, and still some of them have been accepted back. So I wondered whether you can touch upon that, just say, give us an idea why that happened, because first of all, the party felt that they had to get those people out of the party, but now some of them are back and not all of them. What
Yeah.
is happening there?
There are two things going on. One is that the prime minister needed to identify, because Mr. Kishida did. You need to tell us how much money you paid. It needs to be published, and you need to resign from any party posts or cabinet positions that you had. And they did that, and it wasn't enough. The public didn't quite appreciate it. And so in the election, when they closed down the House, Mr. Ishiba said, if you received that money, you can't be on the second party list. We won't endorse you as a party person, and we're not going to be endorsing you or stump speeching for you. So as a consequence of that, some people lost who were members of the Diet. There were quite a few, and quite a few from the Abe faction. The Abe faction is half as big as it was before this whole thing started, during the Kishida administration, when Mr. Kishida disbanded the factions. The Abe faction was about 100 and maybe 100 individuals, and now it is probably around 48 individuals, even in light of the fact that we don't have factions anymore. But I think for the LDP now, they're 12 seats lower than the majority that they need. So these other guys, and there is so much pressure to clean up politics in the LDP. You're meshed in with dirty money and that sort of thing. They need to clean up their act, but they also need to have the majority vote. So I think they've accepted these guys back in, saying the voters, your voters in your district they know of how much money you got, they know about you, and still they elected you. So who are we to say that you shouldn't be a part of the LDP family, as you have been for the last several turns of government? And everybody who received has already been multiple, at least 4 times reelected. So it's hard for the LDP when they're down so much. I mean, there's 6 of them. It could have been, instead of being down by 12, they could have been down by 18 or 20.
Okay.
I think that's the logic that's there, and I think they just say let the voters decide, But the LDP needs to, in coalition with Komeito, we need to be able to move policy forward. We need to be able to manage the government, and when it's a fractured government like we have right now, policy is not going to be smooth. It's going to be ugly, and it's going to be very time-consuming.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. And from Hiroko-san on LinkedIn now. So the Osaka governor has decided to run the Ishin-no-kai's leadership election. The former leader, Mr. Hashimoto, said in one of the TV shows where he strongly urged that by demonstrating effective governments and reforms in Kansai, only then they can build a strong case for their policies and leadership on a national scale. It was obvious Mr. Baba mishandled. Or didn't he see the issue?
You broke up just a little bit there. It was obvious Mr. Baba mishandled, and then you went blank there for a while.
Right, because I was just trying to connect the 2 parts of the sentence. Yes, thank you. So was it obvious that Mr. Baba mishandled let's say the management and leadership of Ishin-no-kai, or didn't he see the issues within the party?
Well, Mr. Baba has been the leader for the last 2 sessions of the Diet. I think he's done a good job. His strategy was hop, skip, jump. Hop was firm up your base in Osaka. Skip was expand a little bit towards the other contiguous prefectures, and they also won some seats in fact in Chiba. The skip was just make it a little bit broader, and they were successful there. And then the jump was to come in and be the main opposition party, kicking out the Constitutional Democratic Party to be the #1 opposition party. That was the strategy. So whether he did a good job or not, they killed everybody in Osaka. So Osaka is dominated by Ishin. The governor, the prefectural governor, the municipalities, all of the national Diet seats are held by Ishin. They were even able to eliminate the Komeito seats. Komeito and Ishin were talking about, let's be friends and let's talk. You leave me alone there, and I'll let you have this one here. And those negotiations fell down. So I think in one respect, he did a pretty good job. But I mean, they're looking at the Democratic Party for the People and how they increased their votes. And why the hell didn't you do that? How come you couldn't do something like that? But also it's politics, and everybody wants to be the leader. And being governor of Osaka, maybe it's a power play. He's 49 years old. He's a lawyer. He's very astute, very well liked in Osaka. He's he actually was in the Diet, and then he came back to Osaka to run for a municipal campaign, and quickly ran for governor, beating soundly the LDP and Komeito candidate. So he's got a good pedigree there. I don't know what he's going to do about running Ishin out of Osaka if he's going to retain the governorship as a consequence. He can. It's just a party post. So much is left to be seen. But we do know that Mr. Baba will no longer be the leader. But that's not the end of the story for him, for sure.
Well, no. And he's in the Diet at the moment, right? He was re-elected. Probably he will continue to be re-elected if there is no major scandal there. So he may be, as you said, a very powerful figure in the opposition still. And then Hiroko-san writes, I'm also closely watching the Hyogo Governorship election. I saw on TV that there are so many supporters at Saito's campaign speeches. So obviously we are seeing the rise of new leaders, as it seems. And, well, who knows what happens next? And I expect that also, well, probably soon after Mr. Ishiba has done his job as prime minister, there will be new faces, new leaders of the LDP as well, because like it or not, the generation that governed, let's say, the LDP and the country for the past 15 or 20 years, they are getting, old. And so I think that it's time for new people to come up and show up, actually. Timothy is laughing. Yeah,
well,
you're
isn't always the way? That's what we're always talking about. We're always complaining. It's always the old guys in these loud suits that should have retired, when they were in their 70s, but they're not calling the shots. But yeah, I sense this movement coming forward too. And I think people are taking a page out of Mr. Tamaki's campaign. And that's what's going on in Hyogo too. Use social media, attract the voting young, get them out on the street, make them vote, make them interested in politics. And yes, I agree with you that probably Mr. Ishiba's tenure, I believe it will last until we pass the budget on April 1st. But I think a new prime minister is already in the works. I think, yeah, it would be nice to keep him there, but you just never know. I mean, he had a 5-minute phone call with Donald Trump congratulating him on his victory, right?
Yeah.
But essentially that phone call was, what they were talking about was 2 minutes, because you have to also interject the role of the translator. So I think there are other candidates more perfectly suited for the kind of situation that Japan is in regionally and internationally, globally. Mr. Ishiba won because of the infighting and LDP politics and the slush scandal. But I just, it's so unstable now. I can't see it surviving for very long.
Yeah, but it's unstable. Right. Go ahead.
The only thing I would like to tie this comment up with is that we are not in danger. Democracy is working in Japan. They just finished an election for the president of the LDP that transitioned into a prime minister and then an election of the members of the lower house. Nobody was in the streets rioting. Nobody got hurt or killed. It's pretty safe and secure, all things being considered equal. So yeah, it's interesting. Japanese politics is very interesting.
It is very interesting, and also it makes you appreciate some of the ways things are done here, even though, peace and, democracy, let's say, they are preserved, right? So there is a lot of turmoil, but there is no violence, which is really wonderful. It seems like Japan is one of the very few pockets in the world where you can still appreciate or enjoy democracy without much turmoil. Violence and demonstrations and everything. Although I think that demonstrations are not a bad thing per se. It's, painful when they become violent. So, yeah. Well, okay. Thanks a lot for this, Timothy. It looks like we have gone through all the questions for today. And I can say to everybody, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your questions. If you are with us, just let us know by hitting like or hitting subscribe or hitting follow, depending on which platform you are. So this is once again Sunday, November the 17th, and Timothy is reporting from his boat. And we are going to, to be here once again on Sunday next week at 8:20. Yes?
Good luck with your cat, Maya. I guess your cat is in cat jail.
She's in her room, her own room. She's got a room here, probably sleeping there on the heat pad she's got. So, yes. Okay. Thanks a lot for this, and we'll be here once again next Sunday morning, 8:20. Before that, we'll be here once again at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning, talking about journeys, Japanese journeys of Japanese expatriates or people who have come to Japan and stayed here. Thank you very much. And once again, I want to say thank you very much to our two sponsors, Kanagawa Chuo Jutaku or Kanchu. You can find them at kanachu.com and contact James Howell at james@kanachu.com, and also Houze Inc. with Hanoru Shizawa Howell. It's a pleasure to promote you here. So thank you very much for being our sponsors. And to everybody, have a great weekend and a bright new week.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Click.